My name is Maya Lin. I am 36 years old, and for 15 years, I was the quiet, invisible engine that kept my family's world turning. If you come from an immigrant family or a traditional household, you know the unspoken hierarchy. There is the child who is celebrated for simply existing, and there is the child who is expected to bear the weight of everyone else's survival. In my family, my older brother Julian was the golden child. Julian was charismatic, tall, and carried himself with the effortless confidence of a man who had never been held accountable for a single mistake. When he dropped out of 3 different colleges, my parents called him a free spirit searching for his passion. When he crashed 2 cars in 5 years, my father paid the insurance settlements and bought him a new sedan. Julian has a grand vision, my mother Helen would say, beaming whenever his name was mentioned. He just operates on a higher frequency than the rest of us. I operated on the frequency of hard work. I went to a state university on a full academic scholarship, earned my master's degree in accounting, and became a senior financial auditor at a top firm in Chicago. I bought my own townhome at 29, paid off my debts, and lived a modest, disciplined life. I never asked my parents for $1. In fact, every month for 10 years, I transferred $1,500 into my parents' checking account to cover their mortgage and medical insurance. I paid for my mother's dental implants. I paid for my father's hearing aids. Whenever I tried to talk to my parents about my own life, my career milestones, my promotions, or my exhaustion, my mother would pat my hand and say, "Maya, you are so strong. You don't need anyone. But Julian is struggling right now. We have to help him." I accepted it because I loved them. I convinced myself that my parents relied on me because they trusted me, and that loving family meant sacrificing without expecting applause. I didn't realize that to my family, my sacrifice wasn't love. It was an entitlement. The illusion shattered 3 months ago, during my father's 75th birthday dinner. My father, Arthur, had spent 40 years working as a high school history teacher. He retired with a modest pension and a modest reputation as a gentle, quiet man. My mother had always handled the household chores, but my father handled the family's legal affairs, or so I thought. 2 weeks before the birthday dinner, my father called me at my office. His voice sounded thin, frail, and trembling. "Maya," he choked out, "I need your help. The IRS sent a notice. There's an unpaid back tax liability on the family house from 5 years ago, $42,000. They're threatening a tax lien. I don't have that kind of money, Maya. I don't know what to do." I froze. $42,000 was a massive amount, but hearing my 70-year-old father sound so terrified broke my heart. "Dad, take a deep breath," I said immediately. "Don't panic. I have my emergency savings. I'll liquidate some of my index funds and cover it. Just email me the notice." No, don't worry about the paperwork," he said hastily. "Just transfer the money to my personal account at Oakridge Local Bank. I'll go to the tax office and pay it directly. You're a lifesaver, Maya. I don't know what I'd do without my good daughter." That afternoon, without hesitation, I liquidated $42,000 of my personal investments and wired the funds straight into my father's Oakridge Bank account. I felt a surge of dutiful pride. I was protecting my parents' home. 10 days later came my father's 70th birthday dinner at an elegant Italian restaurant downtown. The whole extended family was there: Aunt Eleanor, Uncle David, my cousins, and of course my brother Julian. Julian arrived late, wearing a tailored Italian suit, laughing loudly, and placing a massive ribbon-wrapped box on the table. During the toasts, Julian stood up, tapped his champagne glass, and cleared his throat. "Everyone," Julian announced loudly, his voice echoing across the private dining room. "As you know, turning 70 is a huge milestone. My dad spent his whole life driving old, beat-up sedans so he could provide for us. Well, Dad, today that changes." Julian tossed a set of leather-bound keys across the table. My father picked them up, his eyes wide. "Go look out the window, Dad." Julian grinned smugly. My father, mother, and all the guests walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the parking lot. Parked under the street lamp was a brand-new, luxury Mercedes-Benz E-Class, shining under the lights. The entire table erupted into applause. Aunt Eleanor wiped away tears. "Oh, Julian, you are such a devoted son." My mother held Julian's face in her hands, her eyes shining. "I always knew you would do great things, my boy. Look at what you've done for your father." Julian puffed out his chest. "Only the best for my parents. I paid for it in full. Cash." I stood at the back of the room, clapping politely, feeling a strange knot tightening in my stomach. Julian hadn't held a steady job in 2 years. His last business venture, a luxury sneaker resale boutique, had gone bankrupt 6 months ago. Where did he get $42,000 in cash to pay a down payment and full purchase price for a luxury vehicle? A cold, sharp intuition, the kind honed by 10 years of auditing corporate fraud, started whispering in the back of my mind. The next morning, I didn't go to my office. I drove straight to the main branch of Oakridge Local Bank. Because I had been a co-signatory on my parents' primary checking account since my college days to help them pay bills, I had legal access to review the main account statement. But when the teller pulled up my father's profile, something strange appeared on the screen. There wasn't just one account. There were 2. The second account was a private, high-yield savings account under my father's name, opened 7 years ago. I asked the teller to print the full transaction history for both accounts for the past 90 days. Sitting in my car in the bank parking lot, I spread the bank statements across the passenger seat and began reviewing them with my red auditor's pen. Within 5 minutes, the truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. There was no $42,000 IRS tax lien. The house taxes were completely up to date and had been auto-paid from the monthly allowance I sent them every month. The $42,000 I had wired to my father 10 days ago hadn't gone to the government. 2 days after my wire transfer arrived, my father had written a cashier's check for $42,000 directly to the luxury car dealership down the street. My father had lied to me. He had used my panic, my love, and my dutiful nature to scam $42,000 out of my life savings just so my deadbeat brother could present a luxury Mercedes at a birthday dinner and pretend to be a successful, generous son. My hands began to shake, but as I turned the pages of the secondary private account, the betrayal grew even deeper. Over the last 7 years, my parents had been secretly transferring 50% of the monthly allowance I sent them into this second account. The balance in that account was $115,000. Attached to the back of the account file was a trust document registered with a local probate lawyer. The document specified that upon my parents' death, the entire $115,000 balance, money built entirely out of my hard-earned monthly transfers, was to be inherited exclusively by Julian Lynn. I was paying for my own disenfranchisement. I was funding my parents' lives, while they quietly siphoned off my hard work to build a secret trust fund for the son who had never earned a dime in his life. I sat in my car for 2 hours in dead silence. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. The deep, warm love I had carried for my family for 36 years simply evaporated, leaving behind a cold, crystalline clarity. They thought I was the reliable child who would never check the receipts. They thought my silence was weakness. They were about to learn the difference between silence and strategy. Instead of confronting them right away, I spent the next 3 weeks operating in total secrecy. As a senior auditor, I knew how to execute a clean financial detachment. Step 1. I contacted my bank and permanently revoked the monthly $1,500 recurring wire transfer to my parents' account. Step 2. I hired a probate and estate lawyer named Marcus Vance. I handed him the bank statements, the transaction logs of my $42,000 wire transfer, and the audio recording of my father's phone call claiming the money was for an IRS emergency, which had been automatically recorded by my work phone app. This is clear civil fraud and misrepresentation, Marcus told me, reviewing the evidence. We can file a civil lawsuit tomorrow to freeze that account and demand the return of your $42,000. No, I said calmly. If we file a quiet lawsuit, they'll spin it. My mother will tell the whole family I'm an ungrateful, cold-hearted daughter suing her elderly father. I want the truth laid out where no one can twist it. What do you have in mind? Marcus asked. My mother is throwing a big Sunday family brunch this weekend to celebrate Julian's new corporate consulting firm, I said with a cold smile. Everyone will be there. I want you to serve the legal papers in person. On Sunday at 1 p.m., my parents' house was filled with the smell of roasted meats and expensive wine. Aunt Eleanor, Uncle David, my cousins, and several family friends were sitting around the grand dining table. Julian was at the head of the table, holding a glass of Pinot Noir, holding court about his new business venture. My mother was serving dishes, looking at Julian with adoration. My father was sitting near the window, looking relaxed and content. I walked in 20 minutes late, wearing a crisp charcoal suit, carrying a single manila folder. Maya, you made it, my mother exclaimed, rushing over. Sit down. Julian was just telling us about his new client contracts in New York. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Mom, I said smoothly, taking a seat directly across from my father and Julian. My father gave me a warm, fond smile. Good to see you, sweetheart. You look tired. Working too hard? I work hard so other people can enjoy the fruits of my labor, Dad, I said, my voice cutting through the dinner chatter like a blade. You know how it is. The table went quiet. My mother frowned slightly. Maya, what is that supposed to mean? Dad knows what it means, I said, placing the manila folder on the polished dining table. I opened the folder and took out 3 stacks of color-printed documents. I passed the first stack to Aunt Eleanor, the second to Uncle David, and placed the third directly in front of my father. What is this nonsense? Julian snapped, setting his glass down. We're trying to have a family meal, Maya. That nonsense, Julian, is the bank paper trail for your brand new Mercedes, I said clearly. Aunt Eleanor put on her reading glasses and gasped as she read the top page. Wait, $42,000 wire transfer from Maya's savings? Let me explain it to everyone, I said, standing up and leaning over the table. 3 weeks ago, Dad called me crying, saying the IRS was putting a $42,000 lien on this house. He begged me for my emergency savings. Being the dutiful daughter, I liquidated my investments and wired him the cash. My mother's face went pale. She looked at my father. Arthur, what is she talking about? 2 days later, I continued, pointing at the second page. Dad didn't pay the IRS. He wrote a cashier's check for $42,000 to Oakridge Auto Dealership. And 2 days after that, Julian walked into Dad's birthday party, pretending he bought a Mercedes with his own hard-earned money. The dining room descended into a suffocating, horrified silence. Uncle David looked at Julian with disgust. Julian, you let your sister pay for your car while you took the credit? It wasn't like that, Julian stammered, his face turning beet red. Dad gave me a gift. I didn't know where the money came from. You knew, I said coldly, because your name is on the secondary bank account. I pulled out the second set of documents, the trust agreement, and the transaction logs of the secret Oakridge savings account. And here, I said, looking my mother straight in the eyes, is the proof that for 7 years, the $1,500 I sent every month to help with your medical bills and mortgage was being secretly funneled into a private $115,000 trust fund meant exclusively for Julian. My mother froze. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. You took my hard work, my youth, my stress, and my health, I said, my voice steady, measured, and devoid of any anger. And you quietly handed it to a grown man who has never worked an honest year in his life. My father slammed his hand on the table, his face contorted in panic and embarrassment. Maya, how dare you humiliate your family in front of our guests? Family business stays in the family. You are being bitter and selfish. Selfish? I laughed, a short, sharp, terrifying sound. Dad, look out the window. Right on cue, a dark sedan pulled into the driveway behind Julian's shiny Mercedes. A man in a dark suit carrying a legal briefcase stepped out and walked up the front porch steps. The doorbell rang. I walked over to the front door, opened it, and escorted Marcus Vance, my lawyer, into the dining room. Mr. Arthur Lynn and Mr. Julian Lynn, Marcus said professionally, pulling 2 thick legal packets from his briefcase. You are officially being served with a civil summons for fraud, conversion, and unjust enrichment in the Circuit Court of Cook County. Marcus handed the legal documents directly into my father's trembling hands and placed the second copy on Julian's plate. In addition, Marcus added, turning to my father, a temporary judicial freeze has been placed on the Oakridge Bank account containing the $115,000 pending the court's determination of ownership. Have a good afternoon. Marcus turned and walked out. The dining room exploded into chaos. Julian sprang out of his chair, screaming at me. You're suing your own father? You monster! I'm not suing my father, Julian, I said calmly as I picked up my purse. I am retrieving my stolen assets. There's a difference. My mother fell into her chair, sobbing hysterically. Maya, please. Think of what people will say. You're destroying this family. No, Mom, I said, stopping at the threshold and looking back at them one last time. You destroyed this family the moment you turned your daughter into a bank account and your son into a parasite. I just finally audited the books. I walked out the front door, leaving the shouting, crying, and complete destruction of their illusions behind me. The fallout over the next 2 months was swift and uncompromising. When the legal freeze took effect on the $115,000 account, Julian was unable to pay the high monthly insurance and maintenance costs for the luxury Mercedes. With the civil lawsuit looming and the paper trail indisputable, my father's lawyer advised them to settle out of court to avoid public embarrassment and criminal fraud charges. Under the settlement agreement, 1. Julian was forced to return the Mercedes to the dealership at a loss to repay me the $42,000 he had stolen. 2. The $115,000 in the secret trust account was legally dissolved, and the court returned the full amount to my personal investment portfolio as restitution for years of misrepresentation. 3. My parents were forced to downsize from their large home to a small 2-bedroom apartment because, without my monthly $1,500 allowance, they could no longer afford the property taxes and maintenance. Julian's consulting firm never materialized. Without my parents' financial safety net to protect him, he was forced to take an entry-level sales job at a local electronics store to pay his own rent. My mother tried to call me dozens of times, leaving tearful voicemails begging me to drop the cold attitude and come home for the holidays. I didn't block her number, but I never answered. I simply deleted the voicemails one by one. It has been a year now. I used the returned funds to buy a small cottage near the lake, where I spend my weekends reading, gardening, and enjoying the quiet peace of a life built entirely on my own terms. Sometimes, people ask me if I feel guilty for cutting off my family so completely. I tell them the same thing I learned after 10 years of auditing corporate fraud. When a partnership is built on deceit, ending it isn't an act of revenge. It's an act of balance. You cannot save people who view your drowning as a necessary price for their comfort. And the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away from a table where love is no longer being served.